Okay, thank you, Peter. I'd like to welcome everyone here to the meeting of the LAMP Committee of the North Carolina State Bar. Appreciate you all being here today under these unusual circumstances. Let me be sure to say right off the bat that in accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it's the duty of every member of this committee to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict. Does any member have any known conflicts of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the committee today? If so, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict and refrain from undue participation in the particular matters involved. Our president, Colin Willoughby, contacted me this morning. He expressed his regrets. He's not going to be able to attend, but he is in court in a sentencing hearing. So he wishes he could be here. The introductions, and maybe I ought to ask Jennifer how that might best be handled. I don't know. Again, I'm Brandy Vickery. I'm the bar counselor for the 9th district. That's Wayne, Lenoir, and Greene counties. Chairman of the LAMP committee, I presume mainly because, or I'm on the LAMP committee because of Seymour Johnson being in one of my counties, Wayne County. But any suggestions, Jennifer, on how to do other introductions?
Randy, I think that might be a little difficult with how many people we have here. We should probably just move on with the agenda, and next time we're all in person, we can do introductions again.
Okay, wonderful.
Everyone has their little name underneath their picture, so.
Okay, there you go. All right, let's go to the approval of the minutes. Do we have Mike Archer? Well, we may not.
Can you hear me? This is Mike Archer.
Okay, good.
I have provided the minutes before. They should have been sent via email.
They were.
Right.
And those would be the minutes, not from the January meeting, which was the last one we actually had.
Right.
And I would, I do my best to make sure that they are accurate. I believe they are, and I'd ask for approval of those minutes.
This is Gil Beck. I would move for the approval of the minutes.
This is Kirk Warner, second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve in a second. Any discussion on that? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to the CLE report. Mike and John Brooker.
Yeah, this is Mike Archer again. There's not a whole lot to report about the CLE, which of course was our plans were interrupted by a pandemic. We did have discussions about the CLE, and it appears, and we usually have ours in the November, October timeframe. We're not ready to do a CLE at this point. Could we get ready by October? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the NCBA they were ready to do a CLE, a military-related CLE. They were ready to pull the trigger on that, and then the pandemic happened. So it would appear that probably the way forward is for them to do their CLE in the fall timeframe, and for the LAMP committee CLE to push to March. In terms of the venue, and certainly John can speak to this, UNC Chapel Hill is a terrific venue. And if we can go back there again and lean on them for the support, I'd like to do that. We did have some discussion about the 1-day versus 2-day CLE, and 2 days is a much bigger lift for the university than the 1 day. And I think probably we do a reprise, but in the March timeframe. Over to John.
Mike, you said it all for the most part. UNC Law is not ready to host folks in November. It is because of the pandemic. So much is still up in the air, but I think it's safe to say we should not plan on a in-person CLE in Van Hecke-Wettacall in November. That cannot be supported. The springtime as a concept, we're happy to support it. The CLE section's happy to support it. We'll do all we can. But of course, it goes without saying, this is all COVID dependent. And we are dependent on guidance from the university as a whole, not just the law school and whether Dean Brinkley supports it, because he does. But we have to take guidance from the South building too. So on social distancing and whether the building's open to visitors or what. So we're happy to support at UNC and provide all the logistical support just like we did before. And March sounds good to me, and it's good by UNC, of course, COVID dependent.
Well, that sounds great. For anyone who did not attend the last one, it was wonderful, and it was the one day is kind of a push all day long, but it's well worth it. And I think everybody. I never heard any negative. I know all the reports I heard were very, very favorable.
Hey, Brenny.
Yes, sir.
This is Kirk Warner. Just wanted to pass on what Mike had done. We were all part of the committee that kind of talked this through. The NCBA Military and Veterans Law section was going to have an event in March, mid-March. That's got bumped, and instead of having to go back and reinvent the wheel, that's going to be repackaged and put in the November timeframe. And November 19, I think, is the date. Just for those out there, it's going to be perhaps more veterans focused, if that was possible, particularly veterans disability, and an upgrade there. So I want to get that on people's calendars if they're interested. And then we are fully supporting, of course, LAMP and UNC for hopefully what would be a March program.
Thank you, Kurt. That's wonderful. Charlotte, do you have anything to add to that? I know you are always very active with those.
Thanks for asking. I just put a little note in the chat so that people can see it in writing. We have a good overlap of folks that are involved in both organizations, and we very consciously try not to poach from each program. We think both programs are great and serve a great purpose. So the topics are more sort of for the NCBA program, a little more veteran side versus active duty military side, but certainly of interest and relevant. So, we'd like to, continue this coordination and working together and keeping the lines of communication open. So regardless of what it looks like for the LAMP program, the MBL section supports it, even if we're not allowed to say so on our listserv.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Any other comments along those lines? Okay. For those who haven't scrolled over, and everybody's probably got different configurations. I've kind of got the Brady Bunch configuration going here, and I see that you might be interested in scrolling over to Kirk Warner, and if you got any questions about whether he's telling the truth, he can handle the truth. If you don't believe it, you need to check the one right behind him there, looking over his shoulder at everything he does. So thank you all. Okay, let's go to the major command updates. Do we have someone from Seymour on the line?
Yep, Captain South here. How you all doing?
All right, good. Captain South, thank you.
Next month, actually the 2nd, it's right around the corner. Next week it is. We'll be getting a new wing commander. Colonel Yates is on his way out, and we'll be getting Colonel Funsteich. I'm not sure of his pronunciation. Someone said it the other day, so I'll have to figure out the correct pronunciation. But we are getting a new wing commander very shortly, and also our SJA is on the way out. She'll be leaving next month as well. She's going to a training, and we'll be getting Colonel Edmondson as your new wing staff judge advocate.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So how about Fort Bragg, the 18th Airborne?
Yes, sir. This is Lieutenant Neil Buchanan. This is my first meeting here, so it's nice to meet you all remotely. I am fairly new to Bragg. I'm in the legal assistance office. We've stayed quite busy. Obviously, COVID has affected our ability to do client intake. So we've done a whole lot of phone and email with clients rather than having them physically in the office. Although we're still doing a fair number of wills. We reopened Family Day. Just to give you guys some perspective, in the past 2 weeks, the legal assistance office has had 511 clients. We've done 26 wills and 112 power of attorneys. So it's
Wow.
not slowed down. Other big updates. Let's see. We're looking forward to our retiree appreciation day. We've been transitioning from daily appointments for retirees to quarterly days, so we can spend an entire day to focus on them. Our next one is going to be coming up on September 12th. It'll be a Saturday, hosted here at Fort Bragg. And as always, we are certainly looking for volunteers. If anyone wants to come help out to either do wills or help with the administrative side of things, to make sure we can help the maximum number of retirees as possible. And I will post my contact information in the chat, so you guys will have a way to email me if that's something you're interested in participating with.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Brandy.
Yes, sir.
Brandy, can I ask Lieutenant Buchanan, what is the status and of tax returns? And I know they didn't have tax center this year, but I'm just curious as to how that all played out for the folks down there. And I know they're really not due until the mid next month, but what's the status and what kind of feedback you're getting?
Yes, sir. So we've had no real change in status. The tax center is closed. We've had just a handful of people who have been doing tax work, but they are retiring out and they're going to be gone pretty soon. And that was the decision to close it that was done by the base commander, not something we really can affect. And we don't really have any update on that. So it's no change in the status there.
Did any of the bar come forward? I remember that we had some discussions about maybe trying to find some folks that might come in and try to help. But did you have any assistance there? Has it all been the folks there on the base?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of. I haven't been at Bragg for too long, so if things changed towards the beginning of the year, then I would have missed that.
Right.
But as far as I know, the tax center is just completely shut down for now.
Any other questions for Bragg? Okay, thank you. Lejeune? Marines?
Like Fort Bragg, we've been rather busy. Our tax center figured out how to do taxes remotely for the most part, or to minimize person-to-person contact. They did to date about 12,000 tax returns. The officer in charge says that some of the folks from Fort Bragg actually came to Lejeune to get their taxes done, although that's a bit of a drive. So the tax center usually does around 15,000, so we're off a little bit, but 12,000 returns during a pandemic is not too bad. Personnel-wise, we have finally gotten the funds and the authority to hire a senior immigration paralegal to deal with essentially not the Marines, but the family-based immigration. And that should go out on USA Jobs probably within the next week or so. we're looking forward to having somebody after all this time. The legal assistance offices have remained open here. We've had a lot of people doing teleworking. We've generally had about half the people at any given time actually in the office. To get in, you need to wear a mask. There's hand wash stations. There's an attempt to, social distance as much as possible. That was a bit of a challenge when we needed to get a battalion ready to go to New York City. So if you can't get more than 10 people in a room at any given time, how do you do that? And one way you do that is you find somebody that's about 30 years younger than you and knows all kinds of technological aids, and put different people in a whole bunch of rooms at the same time, and you manage it that way. We're also just about done with a pre-deployment video. We're going to post that on our website, and it will be available to the public, to Fort Bragg or to anybody else who just cares to peek in on that. And we're thinking that is about a week away as well. Not to throw wet blankets on things, but this is the hurricane season coming up. To add to everything else, we have a new article on our website. It's about hurricanes in the law. That is common things that come up with respect to hurricanes, claims against the United States, frauds related to hurricanes, and some insurance issues. And you're certainly welcome to take a look at that. So over.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mike? Okay, how about the National Guard? We got North Carolina National Guard? Or anyone else?
I'll just add, this is Captain South from Seymour.
Yes, sir.
We have been quite busy here as well. We've been trying to do a lot of meetings via WebEx, and we've seen a drastic uptick in will appointments recently. So we've had clients coming in with masks. We'll do the appointment virtually, but then for the executions, they'll come in, and we set up a glass up front to kind of create a barrier in between us and the client. But it's been quite busy here as well with wills and powers of attorney and things of that nature. And with regards to the tax center, we did try to stay open for a bit, but ended up shutting down once the COVID situation ramped up. So I'm not sure what we'll be doing next year, but I guess that's to be seen.
Thank you, Cap.
Mr. Vickery, this is Captain Murray with the Norcal National Guard Legal Assistance Program.
Okay, great.
Wanted to throw in a couple points from our foxhole, where we just crossed day 100 of COVID operations for the Norcal National Guard. So we've had service members of the Norcal National Guard helping with distribution of food and personal protective equipment for over 100 days. Within that 100 days, we also had a domestic civil disturbance response effort. And on the horizon, we have the return of the 30th ABCT, which will be approximately 2,500 soldiers coming back from the CENTCOM area of operations within the next 30 to 60 days. So that's what our demand signal looks at right now.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Any other reports? Any other updates from major commands? Let me jump over to By Shields and our webmaster and get his report.
Okay, Branny. Since our last meeting, we've had 3 new members appointed to the committee. We've had 2 advisory members, Jocelyn Mollett and James Payne. Jocelyn's background is Air Force, as you can see from the ugly poster behind James. His is Marine Corps. In addition, we have had Patty Head appointed as a public member to the committee. The information on all 3 of them that's appropriate is posted on the members page on the website. Since our last meeting, we've had no new or amended publications or written materials posted to the web. We have had one request for legal assistance. That was handled by Jennifer Porter in accord with our existing procedure for doing that in coordination with the LAMP Executive Committee. As a result of that occasion, a question was raised about whether we wanted to change our procedure for responding to those kinds of requests. I think Jennifer Porter broke it down to say there are really two questions posed. Number one, do we want to come up with a more generic response that Jennifer Duncan can use simply to respond to all the requests like that are addressed to the LAMP committee? Or do we want to continue with Jennifer Porter providing tailored responses or more tailored responses? Jennifer noted when she was talking to us about that she has found it appropriate and useful to tailor the responses in the past. The second question that she said was posed by this proposal was whether we wanted to continue having the initial request provided to executive committee members and Jennifer Porter from Jennifer Duncan, and then have Jennifer go ahead and propose a response which the executive committee members are shown and Jennifer sends it out. Or as an alternative, did we want to have Jennifer go ahead and continue tailoring the responses, and rather than having the executive committee members copied on the initial request, simply have them as blind copies on Jennifer's response? We didn't really discuss that online, although it's been on there for a little while. I think I would recommend, Brandy, that we go ahead, subject to Jennifer Porter's additional comments here, to go ahead and allow her to continue to send tailored responses as she deems appropriate, and that we change the procedure, and rather than having all the committee members in multi-steps copied on the original request, that we simply have the executive committee blind copied on Jennifer's response. So I would suggest that approach to the request for a decision, subject to whatever Jennifer Porter wants to add.
I so move.
All right, do we have a second?
This is Gil Beck. I would second that, and I would like to also thank Jennifer for her really good work. I think she's done a fantastic job supporting the committee.
There's no doubt about that. Any further discussion? Jennifer, you want to defend yourself or anything on this?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, if any further discussion on the motion? Yes, see none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? I like John Payne's hand up in front of the Marines flag there. I like that. Good job. Good job. Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer. And again, I was going to mention this before, but for those of you who don't know, Jennifer is our counsel. She's a colonel. She knows how to command. She knows how to make people think they're in charge when she's really in charge. And certainly she's got her trustworthy assistant right there with her, legal assistant, Brittany Wilson. And we appreciate you, Brittany, for everything you do in trying to keep us in order. But all right, anything else?
Brady, that's all I have. Over.
Okay, well, I like that. How about since we heard a little bit there from Gil, Gil's the executive director here. Gil, you got any other comments you want to make before I go on to new business?
The one thing I would like to note is that one of our committee members, Kirk Warner, has written a book about his experience in going to Iraq. It is very, very informative for those that may have to deploy. It certainly illustrates the challenges for reserve officers in terms of being flexible and adaptable. And so I would turn it over to Kirk if there's anything he'd like to say, but I think it's a great addition to the literature as far as preparing judge advocates for military operations.
Wonderful. Kirk?
I don't have much to add other than Gil's my new press secretary and marketeur. But yeah, it's called Zone of Action, and it's essentially a JAGS inside the war room look for Operations Cobra 2 and Iraqi Freedom. And it's coming out in August. So look for it. I think it's pretty funny too. And it's mainly observations, an inner and outer journey in the march to Baghdad and nation building. So should be fun. It's getting reviews now, thanks to General Beck and TJAG, DJAGs, past and present, and we'll see what shakes out. But thanks for the plug, Gil.
Well, that's awesome, Kirk. We appreciate that, and can't think of a better timing probably to sell a book. It's probably a good time to have a lot of people read books. Don't have much else they can do. Okay, let's go on to the new business. Get the legislative update. I believe Mike's got several things he wants to speak about.
There's two things. One, the federal law, and the other is a state law of particular interest to the military. U.S. Senate Bill 3637 proposes to change the Service Member Civil Relief Act to provide that, to change Section 3935 of the SCRA, which already provides people with a right to terminate a lease in certain situations. The service member dies, there's a catastrophic illness, you get PCS orders, you get deployment orders, or the original SCRA, you're a civilian and now you're in the military. So in all those situations, you now have a right to terminate your lease. The Senate bill will add a circumstance, which is the the Secretary of Defense declares a stop orders declaration. So what would happen is that, let's say I have PCS orders to California, to Camp Pendleton, and I go and I sign a lease on a house, and then the SecDef says, wait a minute, nobody's going anywhere because there's a pandemic or for some other reason. And that would give me an opportunity to terminate that lease based on those orders. That would be retroactively effective to the 1st of March of 2020. The status of it is that it was introduced on the 6th of May. It was a technical amendment on the 10th of June, and it was passed, get this, by unanimous consent by the Senate. When does that happen?
Yeah.
And it was sent to the House on the 15th of June, where it is today. Hopefully that will provide some relief for people who signed leases thinking they were going somewhere and they weren't. There's a state NC Senate Bill 706. It says that, well, first of all, it clarifies that military service, the children of service members can go to North Carolina public schools without paying tuition. The law, as it currently reads, talks about domiciliaries having that right. Well, if you kind of look at it carefully, the service member isn't a domiciliary in North Carolina just because he got orders to come here. And certainly their kids aren't either. And it's nobody's intent to say the children of service members can't go to school. And so they're clarifying that. But more importantly, pushing ahead, they're saying, well, what happens if I'm here in North Carolina and so are my kids, but now I have orders to Parris Island and be a drill instructor. And you can't really bring your kids to be, to that kind of billet. Or I have orders to some sort of difficult school in Georgia, and I leave the kids with grandma and grandpa who are in North Carolina. The change would allow, like many other states, those kids to enroll in North Carolina public schools, whereas right now you can't do that without some sort of court order, which you'd have to undo as soon as the school or the mission that you were on is over. So the status of that is that there was a House Companion Bill 1047 that was attached to some more controversial things, and it seems to be not going anywhere. On the other hand, the Senate side, where there aren't the controversial additional things, seems to be moving along, and in fact, it is passed through the Senate and was submitted to the House just a couple days ago. So hopefully, we can next time we meet, we'll have help for some folks to get them in the school in North Carolina.
Great. Any questions of Mike about any of those that action in the legislature? All right, Mike, tell us some lessons learned from COVID-19.
There's some. I won't go into all of them. Actually, I'd kind of like to gather those lessons learned, not necessarily in this forum, but find out what was happening at Seymour Johnson and with the North Carolina National Guard and Fort Bragg, and what lessons learned they have. Frankly, it's likely that their commander at some point is going to say, "I want you to write the report. What are the lessons learned?" So I'll just take some of the highlights. One of the things is that we should anticipate that
Wait a minute. One of those lessons might be the. Are you there?
I am. Can
okay,
hear me?
Gotcha.
So one of the lessons is that when there's a pandemic or any other natural disaster, there will be frauds and scams designed to take advantage of those things. And some of the public websites were really good on providing information about that. In fact, Camp Pendleton, essentially what they did is they took information from the Federal Trade Commission, from the Federal Communications Commission, from the CFPB, just sort of put it all together in in a newsletter, which was actually pretty good. So the lesson learned is to take a look at those in advance, collate them in one place, make it user friendly, and send it out as quickly as you can. Second lessons learned, I think we should have known this was that whenever the government decides we're going to send you a check for something or some asset, that's another thing that people that are divorcing can argue about. And we need, when we start drafting separation agreements, we need to consider that so that it's taken care of by agreement rather than otherwise, put it that way. And that was the CARES Act. We learned some lessons about military stop movement orders, and hopefully the new federal law proposal will be addressing that. We learned that the stop movement and the difficulty of travel affects not just landlords and tenants, as you would expect, but also the sale of homes. So what happens is you're selling your house and you can't leave, and the buyer can't move in. And if they're agreeable, then they just sort of have a lease back agreement until they can move, which is one resolution. We learned that there can be all kinds of problems when you restrict movement, either by the governor or by the military, and you have a court order about custody. You're supposed to turn over little Johnny to the spouse in Virginia, and the military is saying you can't go more than 100 miles away, or the governor is saying you can't go to the next county. So how do you deal with that? And we asked the judges here, how do we deal with that? And they said, well, you try to do things by agreement. If you couldn't agree and it came to a question about whether we're going to have a what do you call it? Show cause, why you shouldn't be held in contempt. They'd be looking at, have you done all the things that you possibly could? Did you ask your commander for an exception? And if you had done the things that you reasonably could do, without telegraphing the results, I think you're not going to be held in contempt if you said, I'm going to not disobey military orders and the orders of the governor and keep little Johnny with me for a little longer. And of course, lessons learned about all the different kinds of ways that you can hold a brief for a lot of people when you can't get a lot of people together in one place. And again, be very interested in, and I won't read all of them. I think there's about 12 of them. Interested in what my colleagues at different military installations had come up with. In fact, maybe I can send these to Jennifer for distro to other folks so they can learn from my foibles.
That sounds like a good idea. Any of the other commands have any suggestions or?
If I could
No.
say something,
Sure.
This is Meredith Egan. I work at Fort Bragg Legal Assistance, and I'm a civilian attorney. I had a question for Mr. Archer. He had mentioned lessons learned in regards to how to hold a brief. I'm wondering what you guys have done in order to hold briefings, because I know that that's definitely a challenge that we have faced here at Fort Bragg. So if anyone could weigh in on that, that'd be some welcome feedback. Thanks.
Sure. Well, in some cases we had briefs here and spaced out people. And so we would just comply with the guidance that said no more than 10 people. That worked for some of our briefs because the COVID also tended to, particularly at first, lessen the demand. But then when we did have to get a bunch of people together, we used Zoom, we used some conference calls, and basically what you'd have is people in different rooms, but hearing the same speaker. And there's different technological ways to do that, but that was it. We also found that there were some of the venues that we usually use that are really big, like the Base Theater. Well, they closed too. So we had to go to different places that, the USO offered up their spaces at more limited numbers still. But so it's a combination of the different places, using Zoom and having Zoom calls. And we had a way to have people make sure that they were in the military and entitled to legal assistance in the first place, and then go to different rooms at the same time. And of course we got our video in work. That frankly I think it's a good piece of gear, but it wasn't ready in time for us to use for this for the last iteration of people leaving.
Okay, I see. Go ahead.
And the lessons learned talks in more detail about how we did some of those things.
And this is Miss Welch, Mr. Archer subordinate here at Camp Lejeune. I wanted to let Fort Bragg know as well that video that we've created is a thing of beauty. Mr. Archer really worked really hard on that script, and when that's uploaded to our website, it will be done in chunks so that the different links will be applicable to things like a section on wills, a section on SCRA protections. And just reach out to us if you'd like to maybe borrow some of that, because that might be very helpful for folks who are literally unable to do any sort of gatherings.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see.
Hey, it's Mark Sullivan.
Mark, I was going to say, I see your hand up there, Mark. So go ahead. You got it.
I've got some lessons learned that we might develop from this discussion that Mike has led in the area of the FCRA for legal assistance attorneys. The first issue is what Mike talked about, and that is no travel orders. That limits substantially cases in which the service member is the applicant for relief or is the other side, the defendant. In those cases, it's going to be possible to use the SCRA to ask for a stay of proceedings. But the concern I have is the second of 4 prongs under the Service Member Civil Relief Act. The initial 4 prongs that you have to get a stay of proceedings is a statement showing how your military service precludes your participation in the trial or deposition or whatever. And secondly, when you will be available, followed by a statement from the commander that the individual will not be granted leave and is not available due to the material effect of his duties upon his service. How do you say in that affidavit or that statement of the service member when you will be available if you don't know when the travel ban is going to be lifted? You just don't know. Contrast that to the usual situation in which John Doe has orders that say you're being called up on X date and is anticipated this will be for 90 days or 6 weeks or 2 months. Somebody mentioned earlier, if you have to go to a special school in Georgia on TDY orders, you're going to know when the TDY orders end. But that's not going to be true with the no travel ban. So that's a concern on the service member's part. Let's turn it around for the legal assistance attorneys like Meredith Egan and others that practice legal assistance. You're going to be representing the other side in some of these cases, and you'll want to say after the initial mandatory stay is over, something to the effect of, we don't need you personally present. Zoom is perfectly acceptable with us. We can use WebEx. We can use Adobe GoToMeeting. We don't need you personally present, so I know that you can't physically be here, but you can participate electronically anyway. And the legal assistance attorney wants to make that clear to the non-service member. That's a way of opposing a request for an additional stay.
Great. Thank you. And any other comments?
Yeah, Randy, Mike has a great idea of posting that lessons learned, but I'd love to have it more interactive so that people could add to it or submit items for it, because that ultimately is a really nice piece for everyone to be able to refer to and utilize, frankly, in their own practices, let alone on bases and installations. So I would love to see LAMP have some type of material or article or something that comes out for the State Bar Journal or just in general for our own members to use. So I would ask for some forum in order to do that.
Jennifer, you have any suggestions on that? Could you be the clearinghouse, or Brittany be the clearinghouse of that information coming in from and getting it out to the rest of us?
So certainly if people want to email me their lessons learned, I can distribute that to the group. But if we want to have some kind of article drafted for the journal or pulling it all together to post on the website, we would need a committee member to volunteer to perform that work. So it would be in that format.
I volunteer, Mike.
Yeah, I figured you might, and it's the logical one. I'll go ahead and do it, and I'll talk to Jennifer about who to send it to, and length and those things.
That's the way to get things done. I like it.
So send all your input, Mark, and everybody send it to Mike as usual, and particularly Neil and Lieutenant Buchanan and Meredith and all the bases. Send them in, and Brooke, you may have some stuff too going from the school. So everyone that's got stuff, shoot it to Mike. Bombard his mailbox, and it will write itself, Mike.
Okay, I'll see that.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for taking that on also. We can move on over to the court orders issue from Mark. And Mark, we appreciate you pulling yourself out of the bed there from the mobile Army surgical hospital that you're in. Those of you that can't see need to look at Mark, see where he's from.
Well, I'll tell you this, okay. Kirk Warner and I now know how to put backgrounds up. The rest of you need to learn. What I'm going to talk about for less than 5 minutes is what I might call government information practices. There are frequently times when a legal assistance attorney or a civilian lawyer needs to get information from the government. And more often than not, the government information is in the form of documents or sometimes questions to be answered, such as interrogatories. The examples I can give you are the following. To divide military retired pay, for most cases these days, you need to know the high 3 pay information for Sergeant John Doe. You've got to have the average of the highest 36 months of pay, and you've got to get that. And sometimes the other side is not cooperative. You need to get it from the government. Retired pay information is carried on something called an RAS, a retiree account statement. You can't get that from the government. You can write to Defense Finance and Accounting Service, but they're not going to produce it for you. They'll say, get a release. And so what if the other side doesn't feel like signing a release? What if you can't get it in discovery? If frequently you have years of service as a question mark. How many years has John Doe served? Or how many points has Reserve Sergeant John Doe acquired? How many retirement points for Guard or Reserve members? You need to get documents concerning what is called DIEMS, D-I-E-M-S, date of initial entry into military service, and PEBD, permanent entry base date, which is how you calculate the creditable years of service. Those documents may be available from the service branch, such as the Department of the Navy, but you can't get them without a release right now. How about an LES? A leave of earnings statement is a critical issue for determination of child support or spousal support, and yet DFAS will not respond regardless of how urgent the plea is or the request from the state court judge. We've got a problem because about 1.5 years ago, DFAS people, Defense Finance and Accounting Service people, met in Indianapolis and decided that they were going to change the way they were operating for the release of information. And they decided that the phrase court of competent jurisdiction is what they were going with. And what they decided to do is to say, if you can't get it in discovery or a release by Sergeant John Doe, then you have to get a court order from a court of competent jurisdiction. But ladies and gentlemen, what that means is federal district court. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've never been to federal district court to get documents and ask the judge to order Defense Finance and Accounting Service to turn over documents. It's just not going to happen. Clients don't have that kind of money, even if I have those kinds of skills. So we've got a real problem of what do we do in getting documents that are absolutely essential for things that Congress has made a priority, like the prompt determination of child support, which requires a current LES or retiree account statement, as well as things that Congress has made essential, like the determination of high 3 pay and years of service or points whenever you do pension division. You must have those. You can't have pension division without those. We need somebody to take charge of trying to find out a way of doing this. I'm thinking of people like Michelle or Meredith Egan, people who have the availability within the government of trying to work with people at General Counsel's office, at DFAS, working with the Department of the Army or the Department of the Navy, trying to find a way in which we can make this work rather than throwing up barricades and barriers for civilian attorneys who know very little about this, and even for legal assistance attorneys who try to get the information. And it happened in January when Michelle and Meredith came to me. They said, Mark, we're absolutely stonewalled. We can't get the stuff. We keep asking for it. And they say, go ahead and get a court order from a court of competent jurisdiction. And P.S., that does not mean your state court judge. So I'm trying to find a way of cooperatively working this out, or trying to find a way that we can tell our people in North Carolina that there are ways to get the information and the documents that we described. That's the problem that I'm seeking a solution for.
Well, far be it from me to ever put a federal judge on the spot, but we do have one on the committee there that may have some suggestions anyway. Judge Whitney, you got?
I would just say, I agree with Mark. The more you can do to avoid federal court, the better the situation. Now, right now, all the courts are backed up. The state court system is backed up even worse than federal court. But if you want judicial relief, it's not coming real quickly from any court in North Carolina.
that's certainly the experience in state courts too. So,
Randy, it may be possible, just like we have a publication subcommittee, that you could appoint, and I will be happy to sit on the committee but not chair it, a subcommittee about government information, obtaining government information practices, something like that, to help work this out and get a solution. And the end result may be that there is no solution. It is what it is. I'm not sure of that. It clearly cannot be decided today, but I think that it's something that we should turn our attention toward, because we're going to continue to get these problems with helping clients and helping attorneys obtain information and documents from the government.
right.
Brandy,
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I think that we need to study kind of the scope of what Mark's proposing to make sure it's within the scope of what the LAMP committee can do and how much we can do versus maybe coordinate with other organizations that have more freedom to do more. So I think we're going to need to think about that a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm sure Jennifer and Brittany and Mark will keep us gigged about this thing. Mark, again, you let me know any other suggestions, and Jennifer's going to make sure we're not getting into territory that we shouldn't be getting into. It might be more of a bar association issue, that committee. But
certainly, I understand.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Mark?
No, that's it.
Okay. All right. How about, does anyone else have anything good for the good of the committee that we need to discuss? I know we're running out of time, kind of.
Sorry, if I could just say something in response to Mark's statement. This is Meredith Egan. I don't know how to do the hand raising thing from my iPhone. But what I generally give to clients, and maybe this is the wrong form, it's an SF 180, just a request for military records, and it at least allows you to request a DD form 214. I don't know if that gives you the information that you're looking for, but it at least gives you something. So that's my 2 cents.
And I take it, Mark, that you haven't had any success utilizing that.
Oh, it's indeed utilizable. I've utilized it myself. I got my own DD-214 from 1976 simply by signing it and faxing it to the National Personnel Record Center, which, because of the virus, is now closed, has been closed for 3 months. But I got it, Meredith, because I signed it. Can you imagine if I opposed the signing? Would you get my DD-214? Hell no.
Right. Okay. Does anyone else have anything?
Hey, Brandy, I've got just some quick hitters. There's
Okay, good.
Division of Military and Veterans Affairs has a July 9 Zoom at 1100 on it's a roundtable panel on veteran treatment courts in North Carolina. That would be something that would be worthwhile, I think, for everyone who's interested in veteran treatment courts, whether that's LAMP or not, we don't know. The PCS delay or moves, the second, third order effects, like Mike has mentioned, is vast. We really need to be prepared for that and think about that. And if there's stuff we can do, particularly, and talk about home sales and rentals and leases and custodies and everything about that. And then third, not necessarily legal, but the state has, DPI, Public Instruction, has come up with the Purple Star program, award program for schools that are military child friendly, and they have to go through all this different criteria. And 130 different schools in North Carolina were recognized in its first year. So for people coming in, legal assistants, whatever, it will pop up on their website for the schools. So it's something good going on in North Carolina. I just wanted to pass on.
That's great.
Out here.
Anyone else?
Franny, I have one more thing.
Okay.
Just some good news. The NC Central Veterans Law Clinic will be reopening. The partnership with UNC School of Law, the General Assembly gave Chapel Hill an appropriation many years ago that has funded the clinic I direct, and UNC Law is providing the balance of that appropriation to restart the NC Central Veterans Law Clinic. They have not opened yet, and I don't really have many more details on it, but it will happen in the near future. Also, and more Veterans Clinic news, the Wake Forest School of Law will be expanding their Veterans Legal Clinic. They have a full-time faculty member now, and Eleanor Morales, Ellie Morales, who is a Army Judge Advocate reservist, and she has left the U.S. Attorney's Office in Winston-Salem to go up the road to take over the clinic at Wake Forest, and she will start effective July 1st. So good news on the Veterans Clinic front. Over.
Well, that's great. Any other?
This is Matt Wilcutt, real quick, last minute. The VA has taken a very strong stance against paralegal use, paralegal and administrative use, dealing with claims, specifically access to the case itself. So paralegals and law firm staff do not have authority to just obtain the raw documents like they could if they went and tried to get a copy at the courthouse. So I'm on the board of the National Law School Veteran Clinics Consortium, which is the newest VSO, Veteran Service Organization, approved by Congress. And we wrote an amicus brief in a case that is currently before the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. And the ABA also filed public comments and related regulations. But yeah, the VA is taking a very hard stance on paralegals and legal admin staff being able to assist attorneys. And the reason the law school clinic wrote that is, of course, law school clinics sometimes employ paralegals, but this would extend to students as well. So students, doing internships at any other firm might be asked, hey, can you go get a copy of this file or something, to bring back to the attorney to get work. In VA world, the attorney has to do all of the collecting and disseminating directly. So we think that that's not proper under the rules of professional conduct, that we are barred from delegating in that manner. And so that's just something to look out for. Hopefully we get recognition for what paralegals and students and staff add to the value of all of these organizations, and take some weight off of the attorney having to do that much extra work.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, Matt. It looks like we're about out of time. Appreciate you all being here. There is a subcommittee meeting on the updating of the publications. And again, I want to give a shout out to Leslie Finley for her willingness to chair that subcommittee. This is something that's been a long time coming. Mark has done yeoman's work for many, many years in putting our keeping that incredible website of the LAMP committee up with some very valuable information. And finally, we're going to be at least trying to take a little heat off of him to keep those updated without him having to do everything. But again, appreciate everybody being here. Unless anybody has anything else, I want to remind you all the next meeting, and hopefully we'll all be together, will be October 22nd this year, October 22 at the State Bar headquarters in Raleigh. And we'll keep our fingers crossed about that.
And that subcommittee is actually chaired by Michelle Weiner-Pike.
Okay. Right. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else? All right. With that, then we will be over.